This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. The following Care Lab podcast does not provide health or medical advice. All content is provided for information purposes only. Listeners are encouraged to speak with their healthcare provider for specific healthcare advice and are wholly responsible for the outcome of implementing any tips or information presented.
Welcome to Care Lab. We're here.
Welcome to Care Lab. Yay! It's Care Lab Day.
Care Lab Day.
Okay, today's going to be a really good one because
the other ones are bad.
No, the other ones are also. Geez, Brandy, come on now.
I'm just saying. You're saying, oh, you look nice today, and you're like, no, did I look bad yesterday?
Yeah, no. The other ones are also great. So if you haven't listened previously to Care Lab, you should definitely like and subscribe and go ahead and check out all of the episodes. Just as soon, like and subscribe right now. Listen to the other episodes right after you finish this one that we're starting right now with the fabulous and amazing Elizabeth Miller, who I'm going to tell you just a little bit about, and then we're going to pop into our little icebreaker question before we get serious here. But we're really, really grateful and excited to have Elizabeth here today. She is an incredible family caregiver advocate. She is a family caregiver, has been a family caregiver herself. She's a speaker, an author, a podcast host. She is a certified caregiving consultant, a certified senior advisor. She has a ton of personal experience caring for her own aging parents, as well as a sibling with developmental disabilities, which ended up being what inspired her to create Happy, Healthy Caregiver, which is also the name of the podcast. She's currently an empty nester living in Marietta, Georgia with her husband and 2 dogs. And she's here with us today. Yay! Welcome, Elizabeth.
Welcome. Thank you, ladies. I'm delighted to be here. And I got to tell you, if people don't know which episode to go back and listen to after this one, I would recommend how to pay for the equipment. And then, that's a good one. I'm going to share that one in my newsletter. Like, I love to kind of gather the resources and learned about Ask Sammy. I didn't know about that. So I'm going to be sharing it all.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much for doing that, by the way. And I'll fangirl on Ask Sammy all day long. It's the brainchild of Dr. Brandy Archie here. And it's like just one of the coolest things that I think I've ever seen, especially in terms of how easy it is to use and like how accessible it is. And but this episode is, it's not about that. Check it out in the meantime. Let's get started with our little fun question.
Okay, so everybody here has been a caregiver for somebody, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a kid. And so my question to you all is, what's something unexpected that you've learned about yourself as being a caregiver?
Do you want me to go first?
I do.
Yes, I realized I'm a kind person and a nurturing person, but I'm also a tough love kind of person. Like I have siblings in my family, and particularly when we were caring for Mom, what I realized about myself is that I am a better cheerleader for family caregivers than I am actually a hands-on caregiver. That's something I realized. And I also realized I don't have a lot of patience, but I got better at that. I got better at that throughout caregiving.
I know this is supposed to be one question, but let me ask another question about that. How did learning that about yourself impact how you provide care or how you are as a caregiver?
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, right? Yeah. Like knowing that about yourself. Like my sister is the nurturer in our family. Like she's the one that loves to do the cooking and the cleaning and the care, and she's just going to make it all happen. I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to do it. And I'm also going to require you to be involved in that. And from a occupational therapist and a physical therapist, I think that's probably what you all maybe want, because I push back like on my mom and on my brother to try to see like what are they capable of doing and to do those things for as long as they possibly can, which kind of comes off sometimes maybe as mean,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's I call it tough love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. Like we do love that because I would say I've spent a lot of time doing family caregiver education like at bedside where I'm saying I know that you want to care for this person because caring is an act of love and it's how you're showing that you love this person. But in order to get better, this person needs you to stop a little bit and sit on your hands and let them try and let them struggle because there's no other way through. So you are absolutely correct. Appreciate that very much. So I think that what I learned is that I am not as patient as I thought that I was, which is interesting because I feel like, from a clinical standpoint, I have endless amounts of patience for my patients. But when I walk in the door at home, that runs out pretty quickly. And so that's something that I've found that maybe doesn't actually come as naturally as I thought it did, depending on the context. And it's something that I've worked on. Sometimes I think it is good to say like, okay, I'm not gonna baby you through this. We're gonna move on through this process, and this isn't as dire as it seems. But on the other hand, I think sometimes I have found that it probably would benefit me to slow things down and like mostly like slow things down and change my expectations, to be more realistic to meet the needs of, my kids or whoever I'm caring for around me. Cause sometimes like they can't always go at the same speed that I am. And if I'm not in therapist mode and I'm expecting other people to go all the same speed I am, like that doesn't always work out super well. So that's been,
I mean, to add to that, Amelia, I know we're like, my mom used to say that about me. She's like, Elizabeth, you move too fast for me. You blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, it's different when you're the family caregiver and not the professional that's caring because like I already have taken a half day off work. Like
yes.
you say, why do you have to schedule things so early in the morning? Well, because I'm already missing a half day. We're going to miss a meal. I'm going to have to feed you. Like, so all of that is kind of going through your head as a family caregiver.
Yeah.
When you're a professional, you're getting paid to kind of show up and do your thing. So
Yeah.
I think it is different when you've got your mind swirling around all the other pieces of life.
Yeah, 100%. I hadn't actually thought about it that way, but I think you really nailed it. That when like if I'm with a patient, seeing a patient, there's nothing more important in that time than meeting their needs and doing whatever needs to be done right there. So I'm 100% in that moment. But you're right, as a family caregiver, I am not 100% in the moment. I am in all of the moments before and after, and mostly all of the things that I have to plan ahead for. And yeah, I think you nailed it. See, this is why you're awesome. Brandy, what about you?
Yeah.
I think my answer is an amalgamation of the two of y'all's answers because I think I recognized similarly to you, Amelia, that like when I'm being an OT and doing OT mode stuff, like I have so much patience for my patients, but not so much at home. And I think it's partly because there's so many other things drawing your attention at home, and because I am an OT, I'm all about the kids being as independent as possible, my parents being as independent as possible, and like trying to support them with things that help them be independent. And so, I think the thing I learned is that to pay attention to that's my default, and then to actively do something different. And so, because I know I'm going to automatically do that, they're not going to be coddled, not going to be doing stuff for them that they can do for themselves. I should put a little bit more emphasis on being the nurturer and like pay attention to doing that because that's needed too. So, like, for example, my kids fall and scrape their knee and they're sad about it. And there's no blood or anything. They don't need Dr. Brandy. They just want me to kiss it and rub it and say it's okay. And then they're off to do what they need to do. But like my initial reaction is, it's not that bad. You don't even need a Band-Aid. Go play. But now I take a little extra step to be like, come here, let me see it, let me kiss it. Okay, now go play. And it just works so much better. But it didn't until I recognized that I needed to kind of focus my energies towards more nurturing because I'm not necessarily naturally that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So speaking of lots of things swirling around in people's heads and lots of things that folks are having to plan and look forward to, things that are exciting, but also things that sometimes take a lot of work. We fast upon us now is going to be back to school, if it hasn't started for some people already. And then, as soon as you're back to school is basically the holiday season, like Halloween, Thanksgiving, it all happens very, very quickly once the summer is over. So, and it can feel, obviously it's a fun time, but it can be an overwhelming time. How, what kinds of tips or strategies do you use? Do you teach people with Happy Healthy Caregiver, Elizabeth, when they're dealing with all of these things coming at them, and specifically thinking about, back to school and the holidays coming up?
Yeah. Great question. So back to school is interesting, I think. So a lot of what I do is help family caregivers find sustainable ways.
Hey there, it's Amelia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the Care Lab team, and here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
Sustainable ways to kind of figure things out so that they can mitigate burnout. So I'm kind of under that umbrella. So what I like about back to school time, let's take that one first, is for me, it's almost like a reminder to reset on some things, like more so even than New Year's. New Year's is, we're just coming off an exhausting holiday season. We have all these pressure to make these resolutions and all of that. And we haven't even caught our breath yet. But back to school is this opportunity that I think is more realistic to kind of just check in and say, what do I want to be true, throughout this school year? And maybe kind of tighten up some systems and some things so that you can prioritize your own health and happiness more. And so what that could potentially look like. And I wrote a post even on my site called Back to School, Back to You. And I think I've even talked about this on the podcast before, but really, the kids are going back to school if you've got school age kids. And so your time is going to free up. And that's a great time when you have that switch to just, instead of just kind of keep doing what you're doing, is to make some intentional changes. If you want to get outside more, or you want to see more friends, or you want to eat healthier, like making some intention for that. So that's the back to school strategy that I share. Then the holidays, to your point, like we've already got a full plate of stuff, and then it just keeps coming. I give a couple talks that are holiday specific. One of them has to do with finding joy in the holidays and trying to put the focus back on that for caregivers. And a lot of it has to do with kind of changing the way that you've always thought about the holidays and being intentional again about it. So some of the strategies there, like in my family of 4, early on in the caregiving things, I was like, okay, we can't keep doing what we've been doing in the prior holiday seasons. Like that's not going to work for me. And so what can it look like? Well, it could be, we started implementing something where my kids were older. They were in like middle school going into high school at this point. And we exchanged names. So instead of mom doing all the shopping and the wrapping, we literally picked we got one other person's name. We gave them the money to spend on the gifts. So they got to shop. They got to put some thought into it. They wrapped. It was more fun for me. I got to kind of see other people's joy, and they just felt like they were a part of it. Mm-hmm. And so that I think was we still do that to this day. Like it's as working parents, like it's a huge relief for us, and it's fun for everybody. Now they pay for their own gifts though, now that they're off our payroll. But we set a realistic budget. Sometimes it was making memories and experiences instead of all of that hula all that stuff, we would, hey, let's think about doing a big trip instead of doing all of these things, and making it very clear, like it's not a both, it's an either or. Getting more people involved and bringing things to the events, simplifying, instead of homemade mashed potatoes, it's Ore-Ida steam and mash, or things like that. And just constantly finding ways to simplify. I loved lights in the holiday season. But at those stakes that you put into the ground that just project on your home, I was like, that's going to be good enough. And I think some of it is finding those ways, and then asking folks, like, for all of these holidays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, the December holidays, like, what is the one thing that you want, like, in your family? Like, what's the one thing that means Halloween to you, or Thanksgiving? And their answers may surprise you. Like, it could be, I really like how we watch the parade together on Thanksgiving morning, and dad makes, breakfast. Or I like how we all get the same pajamas on Christmas Eve, and then we take a picture that morning. So when you get their one things, then that seems like, okay, well, if I can do all the one things and make that happen, then everything else is gravy. So those are kinds of some of the things I give in the finding joy in the holidays. And then when the new year kicks off, I have a talk called Making This Year Delightfully Different. And it's more about how to infuse joy in your year. It's not about making resolutions to lose weight, but next year will be 20 for 25. We'll make a 20 for 25 list, and everybody in my family does this. And I've got friends and happy, healthy caregiver community people that do it. But it's like, what are the things that at the end of the year, you're like, okay, if I do these things, I know they're going to bring me joy. It could be little things like, one year I was like, I want to find my favorite version of Malbec. I knew I liked Malbec, but I didn't know, like, what brand I like. Or I want to, this year I want to try the resort pass. Like, that's something where you can, like, find a pool in your area and go hang out at some swanky pool for the day. Could be trying a new hike, trying a new restaurant. So things like that I know, and it's gonna be different for everybody, but we do like a workshop on that then, of like finding joy. And what I find is that it can be very contagious. Like, you start making your lists, and then we're all kind of just feeding off each other. And then we've got this great harmony too of, like, for your care recipient, if they do these lists and your family does them, like, where can you find that middle ground where you can have joy together doing things, and it's not just all about the care.
Mm-hmm.
You dropped so many gems in that. I mean, there's so many good pieces, and, like, the things that stand out to me the most is, like, physics says a body in motion stays in motion. And so sometimes it feels easiest, even though it actually is hardest or not sustainable, to just keep doing things the way you've always been doing them. But what I hear you saying is, like, it's okay to change it. And if things are already a season of change, like going back to school, it's summertime's over, it's literally a breath of fresh air in some places, maybe not Texas, where it gets cooler, and it just, like, it feels like a time for change. And so, like, capitalize on that motion and, like, think about how you can make your own life work better. And then and that's like that in and of itself is a sustainable way to keep things fresh and not to get as overwhelmed as caregiving can be, and find ways to make it work, especially when you get to just narrow it down to the things that are most important to each person in your life. And then everything else is gravy. Like, if you do extra stuff, great. I'm totally using these strategies, like, definitely going to be doing that.
Yeah, it's been working. I mean, and it's like, it's not perfect, doesn't mean I don't get stressed at all, like, but it's definitely, you've made some intention. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is figuring out as family caregivers what's in our control and what isn't. And those are the things that are in our control, like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. If you're feeling like an insane caregiver right now, like, what is in your power to change?
Yeah, I really love the idea of prioritizing things and simplifying based on what actually really matters. And I think it's easier to do than we think. Sometimes we have to let go of our own expectations of how things have to be or how they should be, and I think, like, I have a great example of something that I'm trying to do in my own life to simplify, specifically for like Christmas and the holidays, that I was inspired to do, really based on this concept. And then it was driven home to me by like basically just having the most stark juxtaposition of like how I do things versus how other people do things. I was like, oh, so like my house for Christmas looks like Christmas threw up all over it. Like we Christmas hard, and there's like, we got first of all, our house isn't even that big, but we have multiple Christmas trees. There's Christmas on every surface. And I started doing that when I was like a younger mom, because it really helped make it special for the kids, right? And of course, it's special for me and my husband too, and we have a great time to it. But it is also a tremendous amount of work
Yeah.
to like fully decorate a house for basically a month. I'm one of those people that I'm like, it doesn't go up till the day after Thanksgiving, and it comes down New Year's Day. Like I'm done.
You're pretty rigid on that.
I'm actually quite rigid on that. I could learn to learn. I could stand to learn some flexibility there. Yeah. But it's also like I need like that fresh start for New Year's, and I love that. But I was actually babysitting in a neighbor's house. I have such a wonderful, tight-knit community, and like we help each other out. So I was babysitting their girls so that they could go to a work Christmas event just down the street. And their house was so simple, like just very simply decorated. And it still felt like Christmas in there. And you could tell it would take them literally 5 minutes to put everything away, and it still felt like Christmas. And I was like, dang.
Yeah.
I gotta
and you got to store all that stuff too. Like, I mean, every time I see something, I'm like, oh man, I got to find a place for that. I gotta put it somewhere. And, there have been some years, Amelia, where like, we didn't put everything up.
Yeah.
Like, I've inherited a lot of stuff from my parents and my mother-in-law, now that, these special people in our lives are deceased. But at the same time, like, I didn't have the energy to do it all. And so sometimes it was like, I'm going to put up whatever I can put up for an hour, and then I'm done. And then maybe next year it look different. There have been some trees that, times the tree didn't even come up. We were like, oh, what's the point? We're traveling, then this and that. So I think it's whatever you have the energy and capacity to do. But if it energizes you to do all that, then do it. Like, that's really my definition of self-care, is anything that's going to make you feel like peace of mind or energize you, or is just plain fun. And so if that's checking those boxes for you, then that's something that you want to keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Elizabeth, my question to you is, what are some of the things, or maybe because you gave us so much in that when you first talked, like, what's your favorite strategy, or the strategy you feel like maybe is not even the best one for you, but like for people that you work with, that you see they need to implement? What's the thing? If there's one thing you can pass on to people, what's that one thing that everybody struggles with?
There are definitely some themes that people, ask about. And I think one of the big themes is usually about family dynamics, and, so-and-so's not helping enough, or those types of things. And it really is about unsaid, unmet expectations is what it really boils down to. And so some of the resources that I have for that, and I had to do this in my own life, like all of this stuff is like, it came from personal experience of me or another client. But I created these like responsibility worksheets, not just for caregiving responsibilities, but also for home and family responsibilities, maybe even multiple homes if you're dealing with your care recipient's place of their dwelling. And then holidays have their own items that come in that. So I created these worksheets, and I'm happy to share the link with y'all so you can pass them on. But to really be mindful about like who can help you with these things and where you have gaps. And as a working caregiver, like, I think, I try to relate to that and say, like, look, you manage lots of projects at work. When I'm talking to groups of working caregivers, like, this is a project. It is a big emotional project at times, but everybody's got different strengths and weaknesses. Nobody's going to be doing everything kind of fair. It's not equal time for everything. And you're going to have gaps, and where you have gaps, you're going to have to find other solutions and other resources. And family is one type of help. but there's a lot of other help out there, including you all.
Care Lab listener, I have a question for you. If someone you love was going to hire a caregiver, what qualities would you want that caregiver to have? You probably want them to be reliable, trustworthy, kind maybe, just a generally dependable good person, right? Second question, would you also want them to be trained? I'm going to guess the answer is an emphatic yes. Okay, third and final question for you. Do you think it matters who provides that training? Like, is it cool if it's just anybody? Or would you want that person providing the training to be a qualified expert? Assuming you do, in fact, love this person that needs a caregiver, you probably want the expert, right? Well, that's what Higher Standards Caregiver Training does. Higher Standards Caregiver Training provides 100% occupational therapist-led training for caregivers. Caregivers get taught everything from gold standard foundational skills for transfers and activities of daily living, all the way up to how to deal with specific diseases, injuries, and illnesses. And most importantly, they are taught these things in a practical way that enhances the participation of the person being cared for. And it protects the safety of everybody involved. Why? Because everybody deserves a higher standard. Find a course for individuals or learn about training for care organizations at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com.
I think that's such an interesting point to make and a really helpful way to look at it, that when we're at work, we expect actually to have a distinct set of responsibilities, and we expect to, in most situations, be part of a team where everyone has their part of the job and we're all working towards a common goal, right? And then when we get home, our mindset totally shifts, and it's like, okay, well, this is all my job. In order to be a good person, in order to be a good daughter or spouse or mom or whatever it is, I have to do this all on my own and I have to figure it out. And that just doesn't really actually make sense, and it's not possible, and it's not, certainly not sustainable. So I love that idea of let's shift your mindset here. If you were at work,
Yeah.
how would you think about this? Let's think about this in the same way.
Yeah, and don't discount the younger people of the things that they can do in your household. Like, we sat the kids down when they were these ages, and we're like, look, your mom and dad are simultaneously caring for parents right now, working full time. Like, we're losing it, and we're going to need you guys to step up. And here's some of what that can look like. Could be simple things like trash comes on Mondays. We expect you to be the person that's taking the trash out, or you are on empty dishwasher, or we're walking the dogs or feeding the dogs. Like, there are things that they can do. And that's one less thing that you have on your plate. And we're supposed to be teaching them, frankly, how to be independent people.
Yeah, and take care of those things. And the other really important part of that is when you add people into the mix, then they also feel responsible for the whole thing. They're a part of the team, whether that's your kids or your siblings.
Yeah.
If you're caring for your parents, it's like, instead of this being, oh, this is a thing that Brandy does, and if she needs help, she'll call me. It's more like, oh, I'm expert at financial management, so I'm going to handle the bills for mom, but Brandy's nearby, so she's going to do this, and this person's going to do this, and then everybody has a stake in it, and then also is working towards their strengths, as opposed to doing things that feel a lot harder than the things that you're really good at. And I feel like, especially with kids too, you just get a level of ownership of the whole thing, and we're part of the team that's going to make this happen for whomever we can.
I mean, ideally on these sheets, there is one person who's the owner of it, because then it gets fuzzy, right? Like, they can pull other people in, but you own it. You're driving this. And so I think that's important to distinguish that. And then we don't want to just fill people's names in either. Like, we've got to communicate this together. And so to your point, it's like, okay, we're creating the care team, and this is what it looks like. And then I think too, have you forgotten about something? Like, it's a good reminder for that. And it can change, but then it also gives you kind of something to go back to when people aren't showing up the way that you had originally outlined for them, and say, look, we put you down here as tech support, but mom's been having really a lot of issues with her iPad, and what's your solution for that? Or do we need to find somebody else to own this? And would you rather take on another job or something? Is this more than you thought it was going to be? So it just gives you that kind of that playbook to have those conversations
and facilitate really clear communications. And to your point earlier, expectations. right?
Yeah.
Because I think that 99% of problems are either caused or prevented by the communication that we have. So if we have good communication, we're preventing a ton of problems.
Yeah.
And the nice result of good communication is we generally have clear expectations too. If we have bad communication and unclear expectations, like it's just a recipe for disaster there.
Yeah, I mean that's the fine line between happiness and disappointment
Mm.
is just what you just described. Like, what if you started talking about these things and you were more vulnerable about it? And I think that's where caregivers and maybe more so women, even, like, we feel like we've got to take all of this on and make it all happen. And what if though you let the cracks show a little bit and you were vulnerable about how things were really happening in your life, and that how your health was changing, how your happiness was changing? Like, you've got to let the cracks show in order for the light and the help to get in. Like, it's necessary. It's brave to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think I really love about the intentionality of like going through a worksheet and sitting down and having a meeting with everybody who's going to be involved in this care team is that it also gives you the opportunity to, one, blame it on something else. It's not on a person, and set a timeline, right? Because while you would deal with this like a project if you're at work, it might be an ongoing project with no end that you foresee, that you have. You don't have like a date. And most of the time at work, you got to get a thing done by a certain time so somebody else can do it or so that it can come to life. But caregiving, you don't know what that end date is. And so if your worksheet says like, hey, we're going to revisit this in 6 months, or we're going to go over this every 3 months or whatever, then that, one, gives everybody an opportunity to reconsider how they're helping, and two, things might be changing and there might be need to be more help. And then instead of it being like attached to one person and them breaking, it's more like, okay, we're doing this together as a group, and it's going to have changes and ebbs and flows, and we're recognizing that up front, and then we're going to deal with it as such. It's just like how, like, me and Amelia have said this before, like when you're working with a patient and you've asked them to do something, the family is like, we have a hard time with XYZ. And you're like, listen, blame it on Dr. Brandy. Brandy said do XYZ because I don't live there. And they can be mad at me. For this situation, we can like blame it on this piece of paper. This piece of paper is what we decided on and agreed on. If we don't like this piece of paper, that's fine. We can change it, but we need to come together and do it. And then it's not like a thing for against me, you know?
The revisiting it is a really good thing. There isn't currently a date on there to revisit, but absolutely, like the minute you have maybe filled it out initially, go ahead and schedule the meeting for 3 months from now. Like, I'm a big, like, when you're at the doctor, schedule the next meeting or maybe even the next two, or the mobile dog groomer or whatever it is. Like, I want to take one more thing off of my list, and I don't want to have to and actually it's multiple things. I don't have to remember over and over again, oh, I need to call, and then actually do it. Like, it's a huge time saver to do that.
Yes. Also, at my pediatrician's office, which I really love that they do this because it's always chaotic because everybody's in there with all these little kids. They're like, and here's the next 2 appointments. And like, they just automatically schedule you. And then you have to call and reschedule if you want to change it, or you can tell them to change it, but they just automatically schedule. And they're like, here you go. Bye. So, yes.
So if there's, first of all, I just want to say, like, the amount of information and wisdom that you pack into a very small, like, a very small amount of time is absolutely incredible. I can only imagine what it would be like to have you come and speak for like, I just can't. I'm sure it is so incredible. I hope I get the opportunity to see you speak live somewhere someday, because I know it would be amazing. But
thank you.
If you had like 3 final words that you wanted to use to help kind of like sum up, what we talked about here today, or, no pressure at all, just put it all into 3 words here.
I mean, like, it changes every today my wisdom that I want to share is like, yes, you can, and you are empowered to make change in your life. And if you are waking up and you are like, I'm dreading this day, like, it needs to change, and you need to reach out and talk to somebody, whether it's a therapist or maybe it is somebody who's understands the caregiving landscape, like a care coach. I think it's finding your community, Like you've got to find the people who've been in the trenches and who understand and will never judge you for what you're going through and what you're saying. And so there are virtual communities for that. There are in-person communities for that. I hope that my community is one of those outlets for people. And I'm happy to be a part of other organizations like Daughterhood that has virtual support. So things like that are in ACAP also, which has in-person support groups and programming for adult children of aging parents. So community, empower yourself. And just like the guilt is going to come up, like you cannot do all of these. Like there is no job description that you could write for a caregiver and be like, hey, would you want to do this job? Nobody's going to want to do this job. And you're never going to get paid enough for it. And you're going to feel guilty about all of the other things that you're not doing right now. And there's nothing I could say that's going to make that guilt feeling go away, because sometimes guilt can be a healthy check too. Like it's not all bad. But when the guilt comes up, just replace it with another G word, and that is grace. Give yourself grace. You are doing the best you can with the information and the capacity that you have right now, and you're crushing it.
So where can people find you? So we know there's Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, which absolutely folks should check out. It is wonderful and unique. But where are all the places that people can find you, connect with your resources? I know you have a ton of free resources for caregivers. Would you share that? Because I know after listening to you, people are going to be like, where can I get more of this?
So I kind of have two pieces of my business, Happy Healthy Caregiver. So everything external, like the podcast, the social tips, the speaking that I do and all of that is geared towards a family caregiver audience. And so you'll find happyhealthycaregiver.com is going to have podcasts and all the links to all of that stuff. I've also got a course on Whole Care Network University, 6 steps to infusing self-care in your caregiving life. So you can check that out. There's some digital resources out there too. But I had to also kind of figure out how to monetize my business. And I didn't want to charge family caregivers for everything because they're already paying so much out of pocket. And that's really where the past, several years I've been focusing on professional speaking. So if you want to hire me for your company, I work a lot with employee resource groups. I work a lot with area agencies on aging. Sometimes they're in person, sometimes they're virtual, different foundations and associations. And I'm a professional speaker, which means that I'm a paid speaker, and you're doing that because you pay me for this, and then I can do all of these other things. And then I'm also have found to be kind of an accidental influencer in this care economy space. And so there are fabulous like age tech things and other products and services that people are coming up with to help family caregivers. And they can, I have built a trusted community. And if I like what you've got to offer, and I think that it could be helpful for family caregivers, then you can advertise on the podcasts, the newsletters, and so forth. And so we can have a relationship that way. So I hope that makes sense. But happyhealthycaregiver.com would kind of be the point for entry point for all of that to kind of get the gist. And then if you've got questions, just reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. You are such a joy to listen to. I feel like every time I talk to you, I get a little smarter. And
well, likewise.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm learning every day. I love y'all's podcast, Care Lab. Like it's, another outlet, because my podcast is very specifically focused on family caregivers, giving, practical care tips and caregiving stories that from firsthand experience. But there's a lot of other experts and expertise out there that need to be spotlighted. So thank you for learning every day. Learning. If we're not learning, we're kind of dying. We're moving towards, So thank you.
Yeah. Life without learning is super boring. But yeah, thank you again so much for being here. Listen, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you are subscribing to Care Lab. Just take a second right now and just click that little button. Make sure that you're liking, make sure that you are sharing with other people that you think could benefit from this information. Absolutely check out Elizabeth at happyhealthycaregiver.com, and we will see you next time on Care Lab. Bye.
Bye.
This is the Whole Care Network. helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.